Well, I'm here to do a little recording at the Cog And Sprocket. I miscalled it the Dog and Sprocket, which makes it sound more like a pub, but it's even Cog And Sprocket, and I'm going to go and do a little interview there. They sell bicycles mostly, and here's their product. This is it. This is what they sell, bicycles like these. And I noticed one of these had a little name on it somewhere, which was rather interesting, because this bicycle here is called Anarchy 100. Now, I don't know if that's a philosophy or the name of the manufacturer. I have no idea. Right, I'm in the Cog And Sprocket, which is a shop that deals in cycles, mostly bicycles as far as I can make out, and it's very interesting that it should be called like a pub name. And the guy I'm about to interview is in this magazine here. There's the archetypal image of a modern day cyclist whizzing down the road as fast as he can. This is the image. But this article here in the Connect magazine deals with a lot of the issues I want to deal with about the sharing of the roads and so on. And the guy I'm about to interview, he's going to introduce himself. Here he is, lo and behold, and he's sitting in exactly the same chair, and he's wearing the same sweater as he was when that interview was done. So we're going to try and discover some things. I'm going to ask him what is a dog and what is a sprocket, because that's an integral part of a bicycle. Could you point vaguely to which is the sprocket on there?
Sprocket.
Sprocket, right.
Chainring, or cog.
All right, okay, yeah, right, okay. Right, that's my little introduction. Now I'm going to get him to introduce him to me on the other camera. In the chair, and his name is?
Ian Williams.
And the business you're in is called?
The Cog And Sprocket.
The Cog And Sprocket.
Not the Dog And Sprocket.
Not the Dog And Sprocket. Well, that's one of my leftovers from my Morgan three-wheeler days, because you used to have a dog sprocket and all the rest of it. Which is rather ironic, because, I was doing, this is your interview, not me supposed to be talking, but just round the corner here used to be Baudin's cycle shop in Bath Street years ago. And Baudin's used to sell cycles and motorcycles. But back in 1928, because I did my research on them, reading back through, they had for sale a Morgan three-wheeler with an Anzani engine, so it was a tricycle. It was a cycle car, a tricycle. Now, the bicycles and motor cars, they've sort of developed over the years. They're different ways, but they're coming together now. This is what I want to discuss with you. That vehicle, potentially, give it a bit of tweak, it would do 100 miles an hour. That was then, 1928. So now we've got bicycles, which presumably a lot of these bikes will do that, will they?
Not quite. I mean, 100 miles an hour is...
going a bit?
It's going a bit on a bicycle. The fastest I've ever been on a bike was 107 kilometres an hour, which is just over 60 miles an hour.
Right.
Downhill, in the Malvern Hills, about 10 years ago.
Really?
And it was scary.
Was that with a pace bike or just...?
No, this was with a couple of mates on a trip we did around the UK to raise money for charity. And
right.
There was a big hill presented itself, and there was quite a lot of testosterone flying around the place there.
If you see that hill, you cannot avoid it. It looks right. It's got a nice little bend at the bottom. You just want to go for it, don't you?
It was exactly right, and it was just a bit quick. So, having said that, very recently Alex Dowsett did an attempt at the hour record, and that was at 55 kilometres, or just under 55 kilometres he did in an hour.
Right.
So it's a consistent cycling on a velodrome.
Right.
At that speed, so that's quite some feat.
Well, I think the Morgan was lapped at, that was done on the Montlhery track, which is a bank circuit, so I think that's what they used to do then. But, I mean, fun enough, I've driven a Morgan. I don't want to keep on about Morgans, it's about bicycles, but it's a cycle car, that's what I'm trying to emphasise. I've driven one, I shouldn't have really, on a banked cycle track in France.
Yeah.
And it is a very weird sensation to go around a bank circuit, which of course is every day for bicyclists, racing bikes.
On a velodrome, yes, it is banked, and when you stand inside a velodrome and look up at the banking, and some of them up at 40 plus degrees, and you go, how the hell are we going to get around that? And then when you're actually riding it, you're looking down, and it's nothing. It's, you know, you're going around at a speed that's holding you there. It's the
Yes, right. Yeah, if you haven't got the speed, you fall off, presumably.
Exactly, it's centrifugal forces, and you know,
exactly.
keeps you at the right angle. So if you ever get a chance to ride a velodrome, it must be done.
Really?
Great
yeah.
fun.
Well,
Great fun.
you stock here in this rather interesting shop, which I presume was a fashion shop, wasn't it? Originally built as? I forget what it was now.
1998, this was built as a sport, ended up being into sport as a sports shop.
Oh, right,
and
was
then
it?
became Ashworth and Bird, and then it was empty for a little while. And we moved here from Bath Street, which obviously where
Oh,
was.
right, Bowdowns.
So we had two shops in Bath Street in a very short space of time. The first one in the Odeon car park at the very, very end of 2017, effectively into 2018 to May 2018, and then from May 2018 till November 19 when we moved in here, and so we're nearly 2 years now in here.
I mean, it's a strange thing, but it's got that strange architectural modern feel about it, and which a lot of the bikes have, haven't they? The bikes, the way they're presented, everything is about image, and they are beautifully presented, a lot of these bikes. Of course, some of them are quite expensive, aren't they?
It's a bit like the cars we were talking about. You know, everything now is designed by computer,
Right.
and so when you look at all the cars on the road, it's very difficult sometimes to tell one model from another because the computer programs have produced something that is aerodynamic and efficient and will seat 4 people, 5 people, however many bags on it. And bicycles are now going the same way. The more technology that goes into it, the more carbon fibre that's used, the more the stresses and strains are keyed into the computer that comes out with the same answer.
Right.
Build a bike like this.
Right.
So yeah, they are.
Who is building? Who is building? Where's the centre of the world for building bikes?
China.
Oh, right.
Unfortunately,
Is it?
it's the same with a lot of. Same with a lot of things in life now. You know, when you go to any kind of shop, you know, it says made in China, made in China, made in China.
Right.
And
My only experience with bikes made in China was that a lot of the metal was rather poor. If you tightened up the nuts too much, they would just strip the threads. I don't know if that's still the same, but that was the initial.
Sometimes they've now got
Cheap bikes, of course, that's cheap ones.
It is. They've now got do not tighten more than X amount of Newton meters.
Oh, have they?
So yeah,
Who's buying bikes?
everybody.
Are they?
Everybody. Last year, and the year before, during the COVID pandemic, you must remember the whole world closed down, and all you could do was go outside your house for an hour to 2 hours per day on your own, not any group. So you couldn't play rugby or football, you couldn't do squash, you couldn't go swimming, you couldn't do gymnastics. There was nothing you could do apart from running or riding a bike. And so once most people had run within 2 hours of their house, they decided, let's go buy a bike and ride within 2 hours of my house. And Jersey was no exception. We sold an awful lot of bikes,
Right.
and we serviced an awful lot of bikes, and the government decided that bike shops were important and should stay open. So,
Oh, did they?
whereas the rest of the high street was closed,
Really?
we stayed open.
I didn't realise.
Modified our working practices to accommodate, very, very limited crossover between staff. So rather than being 8 in the morning till 6 at night, we started going at 6 in the morning till 8 at night, running 2 shifts.
The aspect there's a friction point, isn't there, with bikes sharing the road. Now, if you've got a cycle path, even a cycle path in Bristol, for example, they used to have a cycle path that used to go up to the old aircraft factory, and it was huge, it was enormous, and on the basis that there were thousands of people who used to work there, they all used to ride on their bike. They could drive in and drive out, and it was no problem to anybody. But in Jersey, cycle paths tend to be rather narrow. Now, if you've got 2 bikes, or 2 bikes and a bike meets a wheelchair, or a bike meets a pram, a pushchair, whatever, there's going to be conflict, isn't there? How can we deal with that issue? How can we make roads big enough so they're safe enough for everybody to use them?
If you break it down a bit further than just cyclists and others, and you say there's people on bikes and cyclists and others, do you call a kid on his BMX bike going down the cycle track near the front a cyclist, or do you call it a kid on a bike? And when they come face to face with a wheelchair or with a person with a dog or whatever, then on the shared use path, yes, you're going to have an element of whose right of way is it, whose isn't it. Now, if it's a kid on a BMX bike, then they're just going to get out of the way, jump over the hump or whatever it is, or just get out of the way. You have a group of cyclists coming down at a speed on a shared use path or a cycle track, then yes, you're going to have to brake significantly. And it's about awareness, it's about the speed that you're doing. And like when you drive a car, if you drive a car at a speed that is beyond the limit with which you can brake safely, then you're out of control. And it's exactly the same on a bike. If you're going so fast that you cannot anticipate and you cannot stop in anything you can anticipate, then you're going too quick. And that's just silly.
But if you were to slow bikes down, they wouldn't be much fun for a lot of people anymore, would they?
You shouldn't ride fast on a cycle track anyway. You know, the road bikes that we ride, the road bikes that are becoming more and more popular should be on the road. They're designed for going on the road.
You reckon?
And then we do have cycle tracks and cycle paths that go through town and go on the roads that are signposted for anybody to use. So the bikes that we ride, that we sell, that is our passion, are very, very capable of doing 20, 25 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour. Not really an issue. You know, we ride them fast-ish, and we ride them on the road. And that's where you get the conflict with the traffic.
Right.
Or you get the frustration with the traffic.
Because there is no cycling proficiency scheme, as I understand. That doesn't exist anymore, does it, in Jersey?
The Jersey Sport do run various different schemes now for getting kids onto bikes. We've gone through a time relatively recently, and I say relatively recently, I'm wrong side of 50 years old, and I've been riding a bike since I can't remember. And in times gone by, yes, it was safe to go and ride on the road at age 10, 11, 12, 13, through into my 20s, no problem at all. And as the population got more and as cars got bigger and cars became more readily available to everybody, we've seen frustrations grow, the population has grown, therefore more people want to use the road, but the infrastructures haven't grown with it. Roads haven't got any wider, cars have got bigger, therefore something has to give. Cars are now more capable of going faster, accelerating more than they used to, and therefore you can overtake quicker. We've had a culture whereby it's been good to become lazy, and everything has become now. You can do everything now. So kids no longer ride to school, and you don't walk to school anymore. You get put in the back of the 4x4 and mum takes you to school, even though it's only half a mile down the road, and it would probably be quicker to walk than sit in the queue of traffic that she's going to, but mum then wants to go to Waitrose afterwards or wherever, and therefore it's part of the journey.
One of the pluses of the climate crisis is that will all have to change, because the pressures are against the motor cars of any shape or form, but especially the big ones, the old gas guzzlers, because people won't be able to run them and they will be discouraged from running them.
I totally agree with you, but it should happen. It won't.
You don't think so?
No, I don't. I don't think it will happen, because you've got to change the mindset. You've got to change the mindset for those people that are currently jumping in the car first thing in the morning and driving to work or driving wherever. To actually, rather than jumping in the car, is to get on the bike and to get the kids on the bike and ride and be a little bit more health conscious and be a little bit more climate conscious. But it's too easy, and we've got a subculture of ease. So what we need to do is get kids riding to school, so that as kids go through school they carry on riding, and when they get out of school at the other end they carry on riding and they ride to work, because they realise they don't need the car. We live on an island that's 9x5. There really isn't a big excuse.
I mean, you say that most bikes are made in China especially. Now, China's got a culture of using cycle vehicles for all sorts of purposes.
Absolutely.
Carrying goods around on a thing with or anything, all sorts of carrying taxi services, they're bicycle type vehicles, rickshaws, that sort of thing. And they got little trucks which are bicycle pedal powered. That's part of the culture of that country. But that isn't part of the culture of this little island or our country. But the cycle lobby want it to be.
Yeah.
Is it possible that we can be before the system collapses and we're forced into it? Can it?
Should. If in a broad brush term, if we got 24 hours in a day, if we took cars off the road for 2 hours per day and just allowed buses or vans and bicycles, so just think about that for a second. 2 hours a day with no cars on the road. And if you then said those 2 hours were to be between 7:45 and 8:45 in the morning, and 5:15 and 6:15 in the evening, or 4:30 and 5:30, that would allow kids to ride to school for an hour, because let's face it, you can get from St. Juan's to town in less than an hour and back the other way in less than an hour. Right. And that's just about the furthest you want to go.
Right.
So if you take all the cars off the road and therefore make it safe, because safety is the one thing that causes mums and dads to put the kids into the car to take them to school. Right. It's not safe to ride on the road, it's not safe to do this. Well, says who? Mum and dad don't ride, mum and dad don't know. And that's the issue. So the issue isn't actually safety, the issue is ignorance. You're ignorant of whether they can ride.
Well, it's quite extraordinary. They've just reduced the speed limit on a great many roads around the town, St Saviour's into town, to 20 miles an hour. Now, as you say, bicycles can exceed 20 miles an hour.
Yep.
Cars will be restricted. I don't know whether the police will be restricting bicycles. I don't know whether they. I don't know if they do. If they see a bicycle coming along at 30 miles an hour, I don't know what they would do.
Probably stop it.
Would they?
And say you're in a speed limit.
Would they?
But again, anything within the circular road within town is supposed to be 20 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And when was the last time you saw a policeman with a speed camera inside?
I don't know.
It's not happening.
The size of bicycles, generic term bicycles, as I say, unicycles, bicycles, tricycles, quadricycles, but it's not necessarily cycling in the concept. Wheelchairs, tiny little vehicles, ordinary personal carriers of various sorts. There's so many types of vehicle which can exist, but the legislation hasn't caught up with it. Even though these were all around in the 1920s, the legislation, you can go with one of those, a Segway, is it called? You can stand on a Segway. All that's, there's a whole class of vehicles of that sort which are not allowed. You can't go anywhere on the public road with them. You can on private land you can. I mean, there are things like an A4 piece of something and it whizzes along the road. I've no idea how it works. And I noticed that on Facebook that there was a disabled person. They were actually using unicycles of some sort, motorised unicycles. And that was beneficial for them, even as a disabled person, to use one of those. So the categories, I mean, you're sitting in an armchair, you know, the favourite armchair. If we were to put wheels on that, that would become a wheelchair. So there's no reason why you'd have to get out. You could sit in your lounge, have a motorised, comfy leather armchair, whiz out and go on the road. What's to stop you?
Nothing. And if you ride on the road long enough, you'll come across people with effectively motorised wheelchairs. Yeah. Which is, you know, we see them quite frequently. We see those people that have got the mobility access scooters and four-wheel electric scootery things on the road. They're allowed to be there. There's no law against it, and you've got to queue of traffic behind it.
I mean, I'm looking at problems because I can see this is the thing which is growing. As you say, you're selling more and more bicycles. But if all this range of vehicles, somebody's going to have to get to grips with it, aren't they?
Yeah.
Where would your tendency to be? What would you be saying? Build bigger roads to accommodate them, or smaller roads to eliminate the big stuff, or what is it?
Get rid of parking spaces in the middle of town.
That'll make you
which will then prevent people from coming to town, or stop people, or make them think. You can't. You could have a park and ride. Right. You know, it's so popular in the UK. You know, take an area on the outskirts of town, and run one minibus that goes between the parking area in the middle of town.
Well, I expect you've seen the pictures from China of these enormous scrapyards where they've got, because there were so many cycles in China in some of the towns, they had to ban them. And there are these yards now, supposedly, which have got thousands of bicycles in them, which are no longer used. It looks like a production line just produced for the scrapyard. Now, I don't know what would happen here. I don't know if they're going to be promoted, all these types of vehicles. Could we get swamped with vehicles because a lot of them can be electric motorized, that can be that. So they could have very minuscule types of personal transporters, whether it's for sport or for general activities, getting you to work. They've all got to go somewhere, haven't they?
Yeah, we sell a lot of e-bikes.
Do you?
Yeah, electrically assisted bicycles.
Because I'm always reading on Facebook, Jersey police, this bicycle's been stolen. I don't know where they all go, all these stolen bikes. There's thousands of them.
No idea. There was the police came in here last year and they'd found an office block that had been broken into. It was one that had been boarded up or not used and been broken into, and inside it a whole load of teenagers had been stealing bikes and respraying them and welding them and mixing the parts up.
Really?
And the police were then trying to identify where all these parts had come from and which bikes and which frames and whatever.
Of course, the police had a scheme where they were painted bright green, these free bikes you could use when you find them. But the kids were, I presume it was kids, but mischievous people were loosening the nuts and bolts on them. So if you sat on the saddle, it would collapse on you and all sorts of little nonsense like that, it's a shame, really, because it was a good idea to make use of bikes which had gone astray.
Yeah, but it's like when we were kids, you throw fireworks. You don't do it.
No.
It's what happens when you're a kid, isn't it, or a teenager. You become a bit of a hooligan for a few years.
Yeah.
And it's only as you get older you think, do you remember the times when? So you don't think about the consequences of other people. That's the nature of being a teenager. Yeah. You just lose that ability to think of other people while you're a teenager. So, yeah, not surprised.
Is there any restriction on bicycles, cycles, that sort of class of vehicle which you think needs to be introduced? Like, for example, they keep on about the licensing system. All the bikes used to carry a license. Well, I remember...
Car drivers want cyclists to have licenses so that they can be reported for jumping a red light or going the wrong way up a one-way street.
Right.
But when you look at the size of a bicycle and a person on it, and you look at the side of a car, they are very, very different. You can't drive a car the wrong way up a one-way. You can drive a car the wrong way up a one-way street, but it causes mayhem. A bicycle going the wrong way up a one-way street is not a big impact, and it's down to the cyclists themselves to make sure they don't drive into anybody, i.e. the front of the oncoming bus, car, whatever. Now in Holland, I'm pretty sure I'm right.
The sacred land for cyclists, so it
Absolutely.
seems.
You just ride wherever you want. In India, you ride wherever you want, and it just works. But we're a very litigious society that we're in now, and everything is rule-based. Therefore, you have to follow the rules.
Do you drive a car, presumably?
I do, yeah. I drive a
Are you
car.
the same person that drives the car that rides the bike?
Yeah. I occasionally get behind when I get behind the wheel and we're getting held up in the queue of traffic, bloody cyclists.
Yeah.
But it's more for comedy value with whoever I'm riding with, passengering. But yeah, I'm the same. I give cyclists a very wide berth, as I should do. I've been there. I am that cyclist. And again, I come back to that point about the difference between a cyclist and a person on a bike. Like you talk about registration on bikes. We have a ride out of here on a Tuesday and a Thursday night. We just ride out St Catherine's and back, me and a few mates, and then we sit in the pub next door for a quick beer, and I watch all the teenagers wheeling up and down the high street, up and down King Street, and looking to see how many bikes have come out of my shop. Now, those teenagers are on one wheel going down a pedestrianised precinct with no crash helmet on and no lights. And obviously no registration. Now, when you look at my bike and you look at their bike and you go, which one is going to get registered and which one is going to pay a registration fee and which one is then going to be caught by the CCTV for...
Well, there was a scheme, for example, it didn't last very long, that if you bought a television in a shop, you had to produce your licence. That didn't last for 5 minutes, that scheme, but it would have been sort of the regulation that could operate if you were going to have regulation.
You have regulation, and you've got to have somebody to enforce the regulation.
Absolutely.
And that's the problem. And you have officials that have to enforce the regulation, and you have to then have somebody to administer it all, and it costs. And what is the benefit of it? What is the benefit of having a registration scheme for bicycles? And I can't find one. I've looked, and I really cannot see one. Now, okay, I might be slightly biased because I sell bicycles, and I service bicycles, and I ride bicycles, but I can't see what the benefit is.
Well, I misnamed you as dog, but dogs do have to have a licence. But
because if dogs go out and kill chickens, and dogs go out and cause mayhem or get rabies or whatever, you need to know where to go to. Dog gets lost, somebody has to be ultimately responsible for it. A bicycle on its own does nothing. Without somebody on top of it.
We better not talk too long, but the fold-up bicycles have got a great benefit. I live in a block of flats. Now, there's nowhere, if you haven't got a fold-up bicycle, I can take a fold-up bicycle into the flat and charge it up if it's an electric one.
Yep.
If it's not, I have to leave it somewhere, and I can't really take it. There are aspects about bicycles, anything on wheels, wheelchairs, if they've been out in the wet, they go through dog poo on the street, they get that. You have to deal with it somehow or other before you can take it indoors. But the charging thing, because this is something that's going to happen, the presumption is we're going to have lots of electric vehicles, and lots of them will be bikes, and you do sell electric bikes, electrified bikes. What can be done to make that effective? Because there are some charging points. There's a car park now, which I am aware of, where they put charging points in for vehicles. Presumably it will include bicycles. Is it different? No?
I've no idea. I mean, again, I know that the states have put some charging points in for vehicles, and I noticed at Marks and Spencer's the other week there were some charging points there as well, which I don't know whether they're funded by M&S or by the states or what.
But of course, it's not the same charging point for a car as it is for a bicycle.
Absolutely.
Different plug.
240 volts is what we need for a 3-pin plug. So effectively, you can take your bike and charge it with an extension lead if you don't want to take the battery off. Or you can take the battery off.
Of course, that's the other option. We've still got to leave the bikes in where I am, the block of flats where I am. There is nowhere to store bikes. So, they're tied up in all sorts of weird places and easily stolen or vandalised. Somebody wants a wheel, they take it off the bike. These sort of practical problems that go with bikes or wheeled vehicles.
Yeah.
I mean, if we leave a wheelchair somewhere, it's liable to get vandalised or damaged or... I don't know. Is there a lobby group here as a cyclist like yourself? You sell bikes, it's your living. Is there a group here taking on all these sort of multiple activities and issues?
There's several. I mean, Cycle for Jersey is a pressure group that gets involved in trying to persuade the government that more bike lanes and more bike routes, and when the government are looking at parking, saying include bike parking and covered bike parking, and trying to push for more people on bikes. And then Jersey Sport themselves are trying to re-educate, and that comes back to my previous point of the education. We have Jersey Sport doing bikeability in the
do you think, though, the group you mentioned, they're promoting for cycling, are they promoting for everybody who uses personal transport, like wheelchair users? I'm thinking particularly wheelchair users. Are they encompassing the whole range? Because obviously we don't want the divisions which exist now between cycling and motor cars. We want a unified approach to wheeled personal transporters, don't we?
You're never going to get unification between cars and bikes. There's too many people who believe that once they get behind the wheel, it's their God-given right.
No, but I was thinking the cycling section, which can be from wheelchairs to unicycles. There's a whole raft of people who've got minimalists. They don't have to have insurance to be on the road, as far as I know. Most of them don't. They can be any age. There's a very diverse group of people. But the diversity is their weakness in a sense, because they all want different things, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's transport, isn't it? It's moving yourself from point A to point B.
Yeah.
So it's the distance that you need to move yourself where point A and point B is, and how you're going to do it. So I spent nearly 20 years as an airline pilot moving people from point A to point B, when point B might have been halfway around the world.
They didn't have much choice once you were taking off, though, do they? They go where you take them.
Exactly. You've got to get from point A, takeoff point, to point B, wherever that may be,
That's right.
in the shortest possible time.
That's right.
So it's the same with wheeled transport. You know, people are just moving themselves around in a slightly easier way. And whether that is a bicycle, human-powered vehicle, electrified human-powered or electrically assisted human-powered vehicle, i.e. a bike or whatever, whether it's a hand bike, a wheelchair, it doesn't really matter. You know, it's still a wheeled vehicle. And taking cars, lorries, vans out of that category as being wheeled vehicles, you have a whole range of things. So no, I mean, Cycle for Jersey is really about promoting the cycle tracks, promoting the safe passage on your bicycle from one side of Jersey to the other. It's about Jersey. It's not about a global thing. You know, when we look at it with a global hat on, we need far too many people to get on bikes to save the planet. You know, it's only now that the governments from around the world are saying we've got to do something. David Attenborough's been saying it for years, but no one listened.
Well, I was sorely tempted. I saw a young lad driving across the lawn. He was apparently with no visit. He was such a young lad. He was going, where I am, the grass wasn't very tall, but I couldn't see the bike. He was such a young lad. But he was whizzing across the grass, and I thought, that appeals to me. I'd rather like to do that. Of course, you have a little electric bike, didn't you, of some sort? I don't know what it was. So, I mean, there is an appeal about it. The boy in us, and I suppose the girls look exactly the same, the idea that you can get on this machine, it whizzes you around, it's quite attractive, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's good fun. It's capturing that joy de vie that you had as a kid.
Yeah.
You know, get on a bike, you come out and play on your bike, let's go do skits and stunts.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what we do. We have a cycling club that rides road bikes that has managed to capture that. You're out with your mates, Saturdays and Sundays, Tuesday nights, Thursday night, Wednesday morning, Friday morning, whenever it is. It doesn't matter. You're out with your mates, on your bike, fresh air, enjoying the views, enjoying the sunshine, enjoying everything. And that's what it's about. It's capturing that. And if that means that you're a 10-year-old and you get on your bike with your mate to ride to school, then that's what you do. If it means that you're going to ride with your dad to ride to school rather than jumping in the car, great, I'm all for it. At least you've got that bonding time. You know, you haven't got to sit in the traffic, you haven't got to get frustrated. No, ride it, get the fresh air. That's what it's about.
We're going to stop here on a point of optimism. Anything else you want to tell me?
Not really.
No?
I think we're good.
The world of cycles.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mike.